My neighbor told me they saw a tent in my living room while I was out of town. I do not own a tent, and there was not one in my living room when I came back home. Posted by you/the next Mrs. Draper. I honestly don't know what to make of this. The simplest answer is that my neighbor is lying, but why? Here's what happened. This morning, my neighbor knocked on my door and told me that while I was out of town earlier this month, they noticed my front door was open, and that a very nice, blue and brown, two-person tent had been pitched in the middle of my living room. They said they thought it was a little odd, and that's why they mentioned it. I was on vacation over the 4th of July, and my nephew and another neighbor both fed my cat while I was gone. Neither are the type to pitch a tent in my living room, though, to be honest, I'm not sure who would do such a thing. Nevertheless, I asked them about the tent, and neither knew anything about it. I also don't have anything that's blue and brown and could be mistaken for a tent. My living room is mostly black and white. I also don't own a tent. I'm not a camper. Nobody has a set of keys to my house. I have an Arlo camera by my front door, and I set one up in my living room while I was gone so that I could periodically check in on the cat. I'm a little neurotic about her because she is very old. I checked all the footage going back to June 4th, because my neighbor couldn't say for certain when exactly they saw this tent. Needless to say, there's nothing captured by either camera. Unfortunately, the cameras do sometimes fail to capture everything. I'd say they have a 10 to 20% fail rate when it comes to turning on when there's movement. So there's a slight possibility someone could have entered my house, pitched a tent, taken it down, and left, and the cameras wouldn't have caught any of it. But I feel like it's a pretty slim chance that neither would have been triggered. To add to all of this, my cat has been acting super strange ever since I came back. She's very nervous, refuses to go anywhere near the back part of the house, and is not using her litter box. So something did weird her out. So Reddit, any ideas? If my neighbor is lying, which is the most plausible, why? They've never lied before and always seemed like a reliable narrator. They also said their boyfriend saw it too and mentioned how weird it was. Is there any scenario where it makes sense for someone to break in and pitch a tent, but also leave the door open so anyone can see? Is it a glitch in the Matrix? Is she somehow suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning? Am I? Thankfully, the Arlo camera outside did capture part of our conversation, so I didn't completely imagine it. It's just so effing bizarre. I'm just at a complete loss. The whole thing has left me feeling unsettled. /relevant comments. Additional info from Op. Thanks to everyone who's commented so far. To answer some questions that seem to have come up. I took the cat to the vet, and she got a clean bill of health. I'm trying some behavioral solutions, multiple litter pans, special cat food for urine health, calming cat treats, calming spray, Felloway plug-in, etc. It's been hard, but I'm committed to helping her get through this. The neighbor and her boyfriend are both older, I think in their late 60s, and we live on the same property, so she has to walk by my front door to get to the street. I'd say from the walkway to my front door is less than 5 feet, so she has a pretty good view of my living room. I agree with those who said her timing is strange, why mention it weeks later, but I had recently talked to her about my cat's behavior, so I think she mentioned it as a possible reason for the cat's behavior. She did say, maybe in the future you should let me know you'll be out of town so I can keep an eye out for you. At the time, it sounded like a normal thing to say, but if she's lying, then maybe it's because she wants to know when I'm gone? My nephew is in his mid-20s and very responsible. He owns his own home and works long days. Neither he nor his brother are campers and, as far as I know, don't own any tents. The camera outside captured him entering and exiting all 3 days, and he was in the house for less than 5 minutes. Same with the other neighbor who fed the cat. She came over 3 times, all for less than 5 minutes. Neither was aware of where the camera was inside, but they knew I had one so I could check the cat. The camera also caught the cat chilling out in the house, and all 3 days she was acting normally. Till about frogging, lol. There is a crawl space under the house, but you can't access it from inside. There's probably a 2-foot-high crawl space in the ceiling that you can access from the closet in my bedroom, but I have a bunch of boxes and suitcases shoved up against the opening, and I don't see how someone could put them back if they'd crawled back in. I will say that the more I ruminate on it, the creepier it seems. Update 3 days later. So I spoke to all my neighbors again today. The neighbor who saw the tent is still adamant that's what she saw. She said she and her boyfriend saw it around lunchtime and he confirmed it. They said the tent was up when they went to lunch, and down by the time they came back. When I told her my cameras didn't catch anything, she was unbothered. When I suggested that maybe she saw something else, she said, it was not my imagination. I saw a tent from right here, and then she stood on the walkway and pointed into my house. She seems to think someone might have a copy of my key and is accessing my house whenever I'm out of town. She thinks someone sabotaged both cameras and mentioned black suits that aren't picked up by security cameras as a reason the tent setup wasn't caught. She also mentioned that my other neighbor, the one who checked on my cat, had a large white tent in her yard a few months back. I saw that tent and can verify it existed. But this neighbor said that is not the tent she saw in my house. I rechecked all the camera footage one more time. There are no unaccounted for gaps. In fact, there are several snippets of the cat chilling in the living room, looking completely unconcerned before and after the cat sitters came into the house. It's actually making me rethink the timeline of when she got spooked. I rechecked the attic access and it hasn't been touched. I also work from home, so it would be hard for someone squatting in the attic to go unnoticed. I also took the advice here to check internet data and electricity usage. Both were way down on the days I was gone. My gas bill was smaller as well. But if the tent was only up for an hour, that makes sense. So then I spoke with the cat-sitting neighbor. She confirmed the existence of her white tent and explained that she was airing it out in her front yard after a camping trip, which aligns with all the tent care information in the comments. She also said that she has had similar conversations with this neighbor where what she is saying is bizarre and unsettling, but she says it with such conviction that you find it hard not to believe. She also understood my unease, saying the whole story reminded her of the Manson family and their creepy crawling. When she mentioned that possibility, it made me understand why I was feeling so anxious. I have read about the creepy crawling, and the Manson family was a boogie monster for me growing up. For those worried about my cat's well-being, thank you. She seems to be slowly coming back to herself. Right now, I'm putting her in the kitchen at night, and she has a cozy little bed where she sleeps. So far, she hasn't peed anywhere inside since I've started doing this, but I do wake up before 6 every morning to let her out, and she promptly uses the litter pan I have set up for her on the porch. I also started using the urinary health cat food from Royal Canin that someone suggested on another thread, and that seems to be working. Fingers crossed. Next steps, asking the landlords to change the locks. To end on a lighter note, the cat-sitting neighbor also had a whimsical explanation, not to be taken seriously and just for fun, that I also thought I'd share. Apparently there's a Japanese folklore tradition of trickster raccoons who shapeshift and wreak havoc. She pointed out that it is raccoon season where we live, and in fact, I just saw a mother and her babies by my porch a couple of nights ago, and maybe they snuck in and pitched the tent just to mess with me. I mean, it's as probable as anything else at this point. Second update 3 days later. This update will probably be more than a little anticlimactic, and for that, I apologize. To the people who felt like this was much ado about nothing, I agree. But like I said before, it's her continued insistence and certainty about this bizarre idea that niggles at me. So away we go. 1. The boyfriend does indeed exist. I've met him and spoken with him several times. He seems older than her, and is quieter overall. He has stated that he's a cat person and has engaged with my cat in the past. But I have not had the chance to talk to him separately to get his side of the story. 2. The white tent was in the front yard of my other neighbor's house and faces the opposite street, so a reflection is impossible. That being said, the older neighbor does keep bringing it up and is convinced people were sleeping in it. I've spoken with the front yard neighbor, and she was airing out the tent after a camping trip. No one ever slept in it when it was in her yard. But I think a lot of folks in the comments are correct when they say the white tent unsettled the older neighbor, because she brought it up several times. 3. I did loop in the landlords, but they seem to also believe the older neighbor. She's rented from them for at least 15 years, if not longer, and they told me that in the past she's been very reliable and truthful. They seemed spooked by the whole story and offered to change the locks. I figure it can't hurt, so I agreed. 4. The landlords and I questioned the older neighbor pretty rigorously, and she stuck by her story, even as we all expressed incredulity. She reiterated that she saw a 2-person tent, blue and white, fully erected in my front living room. She said it was not a pop-up tent or pup tent. She said she saw it on a Wednesday, because that's the day her boyfriend takes her to lunch each week. She said it was up when he picked her up and down when he dropped her off. She got a little defensive as we probed, so people who warned that this could happen if we challenged her were spot on. She kept reiterating that it was a tent and that she could see it quite clearly. She seems to want to pin it on my nephew, and the landlord seemed to be leaning that way too, which is really frustrating. He's a 25-year-old man with his own home. He has no need to air a tent out in my tiny living room. And he doesn't even camp. 5. The cameras. I double-checked every Wednesday for the last 2 months, that's the limit for the stored videos. No tent. No people entering my house. No footage of her and her boyfriend staring into my house. That being said, there's one Wednesday with no footage because the battery had died and I forgot to charge it, but I was home. There's only one Wednesday that I went out of town, but I left after 4 p.m. and returned in less than 24 hours. I still feel like this is pretty solid evidence of no tent, but I have to allow for the fact that the cameras were not fully operational. 6. The cat is slowly getting better, though we had a setback today when she peed in the kitchen after the gardeners scared her. She is consistently using the litter pan I set up for her outside with no problem. She just refuses to use any litter pan anywhere inside. I have one in the kitchen, one by the front door, one in the pantry, and one in the bathroom. She will only use the one outside. I do think the calming food is helping since we're down to just one accident, and it was on the puppy pads. I'm keeping her in the kitchen at night and letting her out before 6 a.m. every day. Hopefully I can eventually get her to use her litter pan inside. 7. Raccoon season. I think my front neighbor used this phrase because it's baby season right now. We have a mom and 2 kits that hang out on our property. If you've never seen a baby raccoon, you're missing out. They are adorable. So like I said at the beginning, not much of a resolution. At this point, I just want to put the whole thing to rest. I'm changing the locks, so if there are mystery indoor campers or mischievous raccoons with a copy of my key, they'll have to find another locale for their shenanigans. I'll stop questioning the neighbor because she's adamant, and now it feels a little weird to keep harping on it. I'll endeavor to be patient and kind to my cat so that she gets back to her old self. And that's the end of the saga. I'm surprised by how much attention this all got. Reddit says almost 1.5 million people looked at the post and the update. That's nuts. Thanks everyone for all your comments, suggestions, insights, and comic relief. Even the snarky comments made me laugh. Top/relevant comments. Commenter. This is the worst Netflix series I have ever binged. Commenter 2. The tent changed color. Is that a typo or did the neighbor change it? Was blue and brown, later blue and white. Commenter 3. This entire saga reads incredibly made up at first glance. Ops response. I was sort of hoping she would back down and say I misunderstood at some point, but she never did. I'm not making up the interactions, but for sure she's making up the story. I mean, she has to be. It's just so weird. Boring, but weird. Commenter 4. More likely the edge of dementia. Boyfriend might be going along to keep the peace. Hopefully it's a one-off for now, maybe she got sick or something and her brain dropped the ball. But her being so insistent is absolutely a sign of delusion or dementia. If it does become more common, hopefully it stays weirdly banal like this. It often does, if it's dementia and not a psychotic break, I think. Edit to add, I also advise keeping the peace in these situations, if things are minor. Like if it's your parent, definitely arrange for care, etc., but there's no good that comes from convincing the person it's a delusion. It's hard to do, and they tend to, understandably, emotionally spiral when you do. Ops response. That was my thought as well. To just keep the peace. She asked me how the cat was doing this morning, and we had a brief, pleasant conversation. In the end, it's not worth generating any animosity, especially when I don't know her motives, or if she even has a motive.